This is going to be a part 2 to the video about flesh and spirit, because I thought about something. When it comes to feeding your flesh and your spirit, I know a lot of people try to live their life for Christ by separating things that they do into 2 categories. Either it's a sin to do this certain thing, or it's not a sin to do this certain thing. But that's not really what it's all about. When you find somebody that's trying to live like that, you'll find out that they are trying to do just what it takes to make it to heaven. And they're trying to walk that line. They stand close to that line where they are just a half a step away from falling back out into sin. And I remember my dad told me a while back, he said, "Son, you know why babies fall out of bed? They fall out of bed because they stay too close to where they got in at." And that's what a lot of us do. We want to give our life to Christ, but then when we come over here on the Lord's side, we want to stay so close to the sin in the life that we used to live until we often fall back out doing things that we have no business doing. But what we need to do is get in Christ and get on over a little bit so that we'll have some strength to stay on this side and do the things that's pleasing to the Lord. Now, a lot of things that Jesus will tell us as individuals in our relationships with God, because every relationship is different. Everything that God tells us to do and not to do is not based on sin. Sometimes he just tells us things to do and things not to do that will be a benefit to us to help us stay away from that sin or that weight that we was once caught up in. So we can't categorize what we do by sin and not sin. A lot of times you hear people say, ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with doing this. Maybe it ain't nothing wrong with it. But don't condemn me because I don't do a certain thing. It's things that I don't do just because I want to stay 100% away from what I used to be a part of, which you might not know what I used to be a part of. That's a whole nother story. I'll tell y'all some things that I done that I used to be caught up in you wouldn't believe. But the Lord gives us instructions to really help us live this life so it won't be a struggle. But a lot of times we find ourselves not following the directions, not following the instructions because it's not a sin. We don't follow the instructions and stay away from what he tells us to stay away from because everybody else is doing it. But you ain't everybody else. So it's best to just obey God when you know he's leading you to do a certain thing, or when you know he's leading you not to do a certain thing. I remember I was going through one situation in my life real hard, and the Lord told me specifically not to wear my watch. So I stopped wearing a watch every day. And I was asked, my wife asked me sometimes, different ones asked me, where your watch at? Why you not wearing the watch? And I say, the Lord told me not to wear my watch. And it went on for months where I didn't wear my watch. And he let me know that what I was going through was in his hands and in his timing. And every time I would go to see what time it was and realize that my watch wasn't on, it put my mind on the fact that my situation is going to be worked out in God's timing. That didn't have nothing to do with a watch being sin or not being sin. It had to do with the Lord helping me to go through what I was being faced with as best as I could. That's a prime example of what I'm talking about. I believe that's what happened back in the old church too, where God would lead a certain person in a certain direction not to do some things, and they took that, what God was leading them in, and made it a universal sin, like watching television. Maybe God did lead an elder or a minister back in the day to turn their television off. But instead of them taking it for themselves in their relationship, they started teaching that doctrine, teaching against television. Television was a sin. There's a whole lot of things I believe became quote unquote sin in the church based on God leading a certain person in a certain area, and they brought it to the whole church as a law. But I know you understand what I'm saying. Whoever listening, try not to think of your life with Christ as what is a sin and what's not a sin. Just be obedient. If we simply be obedient to the Spirit of God, we'll be better Christians, better people, and have better relationships with God. So that's it. Until next time.